All right, so we'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for logging on and attending today's virtual program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Carey Library. Before we begin, please let me know if there are any technical issues I can try to resolve in the chat. Questions can be asked through the Q&A and we will address them at the end. This program is also made possible by the generous donors to the Carey Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Ashley Rooney. Ashley was a past president of the Lexington Field and Garden Club and is an author of many books on a variety of subjects. I have been impressed on her diverse knowledge of gardening throughout this weekly gardening series this summer that she's been hosting with us now. So please welcome Ashley Rooney.
Hey, thank you for the compliment, Matt. And I'm delighted. Today we have Carla Fortmann, who's quite a honcho of the Interfaith Garden here in town. But this is a two-pronged presentation today. We're going to present the Victory Garden in the past, during our war years, and then go up to the present with Carla's garden. Victory Gardens then were part of the World War II home front war effort. The U.S. government turned to its citizens and encouraged them to plant victory gardens. The challenge was that commercial farms were dedicated to feeding the troops and our allies. Labor and transportation shortages made it hard to harvest and transport fruits and vegetables to civilian markets. We all know that now from our pandemic and when we couldn't get the toilet paper and paper towel that we were looking for. Once the U.S. government rationed sugar and butter and milk and cheese and eggs and coffee and meat and canned goods, Americans had an even greater incentive to grow their own fruits and vegetables in their small flower boxes, backyards, or deserted lots of any size. They even grew them in Boston's Copley Square and the Fenway. With more mothers working and unable to provide lunch at home, many schools also grew victory gardens to supply midday meals. Here in Lexington, the Board of Selectmen ordered all vacant lots to be used for vegetable plots. For the average American, the morale-boosting victory garden was a practical way to contribute to the war effort. Our job was to grow food for our own table, and some 20 million victory gardens were planted. And the US population at that time was only 132 million. And those 20 million victory gardens produced 8 million tons of food. Lexington residents, Shirley Stoltz, who was in this car, in this truck really, was age 15 and one of these girls at her prep school off to help farmers in picking food. And she talks about here in Lexington where she said her dad grew corn and green beans and lima beans and asparagus and various kinds of squash and lettuce and tomatoes and Swiss chard and beet and carrots and cauliflower and cucumbers and spinach. When I came home, she said, I was detailed to pick the veggies for supper so Dad could start dinner as soon as the train got to Depot Square around 6. During those days, the media suggested that home gardeners with limited space might plant vegetables in existing flower beds. Richardson Wright, editor of House and Garden magazine, spoke to the Garden Club Federation of Massachusetts on victory gardens. The philosophy of this victory garden campaign is that in the end you will have a full larder, he said. It all starts with that initial spade when you hate Hitler. But there are times that roses are better for you than parsnips. So go on raising flowers. They will give you a certain sanity too. The Lexington Field and Garden Club cooperated with the Victory Gardens Committee, with the Women's War Service Division, with the Canning and Food Preserving Projects, with the Lexington Service Men's Center, with the Station Hospital at Camp Devens, and with the Bedford Airport. Those ladies were very busy, and they held informal discussions on the trials and triumphs of victory gardeners. In 1975, after the war was over, and after the success of the French chef with Julia Childs, producer and Lexington resident Russ Morash hired Jim Crockett to begin a similar show about gardening. Originally on a lot near WWII headquarters in Brigham, the Victory Garden eventually became part of Lexington Gardens on Hancock Street, and there still is a small building there. Today, the Smithsonian's Victory Garden flourishes on the 12th Street side of the National Museum of American History. In the summer, the garden showcases heirloom varieties of flowers and vegetables that were available to gardeners during World War II. Here in Lexington, we have our own victory, our Interfaith Garden, which donated 1,883 pounds of fresh vegetables in 2019 to Lexington Interfaith Pantry. To commemorate the 75th anniversary of World War II, it has been renamed the Victory Garden. And as part of our celebration of the 75th anniversary, it'll be open on Tuesdays from 4:30 to 6 p.m. and on Saturdays, 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. and on Memorial Day, July 4th and Labor Day. As I said, Carla Fortmann is here with me today, and she runs the Victory Garden, and she will be present. Carla was the founder and former owner of the Crafty Yankee in Lexington Center, manager of the museum shop at the Buckman Tavern for the Lexington Historical Society, a registered nurse, a peerless gardener. Anybody who wants to know about vegetables should ask Carla, and a honcho at the Lexington Interfaith Garden. She also won the White Tricorne Hat Award. Before she presents, we're going to show a video about her in the garden, which was done a couple weeks ago. You'll see it's not quite as flourishing as you saw in some of those pictures.
Small garden on the church property next door to us. 4 couples from First Parish Church wanted to start a garden where everything went to the food pantry. About 12 years ago, about the time when they were first beginning to take fresh produce. So they used our water because they couldn't get it over from the church, and we talked, and I knew the people. Eventually, we talked at the end of the season, and I was leaving 1/3 of this garden fallow because I was producing too much for just my husband and I. So it was decided after some meetings that the whole plot would become a cooperative garden. I would plant and take whatever I want, and all the rest on Saturdays would go to the food pantry. So we're now in our 13th year, and it's been a successful project from everyone's point of view. Some of the lessons, I've been amazed how many people that are my age and have never put a seed in the ground and watched it grow. So that's very wonderful to watch, or to work at this time of year and then come back in 6 weeks and find out that everything is growing here. There's no dirt available. So those are some of the rewards. This is the first part of the garden we planted this year, and we've got our lettuce and bok choy, radishes. The scallions from here have all been harvested. There's arugula growing, turnips and carrots remaining, and this is where the tomatoes will go. This is a group of volunteer workers from the Interfaith Garden Cooperative, which is unique. I found out among churches there are 14 faith-based communities that send volunteers to work in this garden. This is a blueberry patch, and we had a good harvest last year. It doesn't look quite as thick this year, which often happens with blueberries. And these are red currant bushes, and we had a great crop last year. See, there they are, and I was surprised nothing bothered them. No bunnies ate them, nothing, and look, they're just loaded.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. In the this is being recorded for YouTube, and it should be smoother on that, so my apologies.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Now let me introduce Carla herself. And Carla, Jackie Pontefract just wrote me that today is National Vegetable Day, so this is the perfect program. I didn't know. Thank you, Jackie.
We should have known that.
Yes, so now we are here to answer questions. And I have a bunch that people have given me, so maybe I can start out with some of my questions on tomatoes, which people really like to grow during the summer, and there's so many new vegetable growers out there. How deep do you plant your tomato plants, Carla?
I actually plant that it's not so deep. I plant them sideways. So from a seedling, I take that bottom bulb where the roots are, and I put it sideways in the ground, and some of the stem also gets buried and then comes up. You get new roots from that stem, it gives you a stronger plant. Okay?
Fascinating.
So I don't put it straight in the ground. I learned it from a book, but it works.
And you like it and you think it's a stronger plant, that's great. Okay, I'll have to remember that. Do you remove the suckers?
I don't.
Okay, you
I
don't.
do not remove suckers, yeah.
Okay, and what, I'm interrupting, go ahead.
So supposedly you get more tomatoes if you don't take the suckers off. That's the theory that I go with, so.
Do you use cages, poles, or lime on the ground?
No, I use cages. I have some of the wire cages, and I have a unique cage that holds the main stem that was given to me by someone who left her house in Lexington for a smaller place. And this is the first year I've tried that on the tomatoes. So I don't know how it'll work, but I think it'll be fine. They're strong. They're strong because my cages usually fall over. That's a problem.
And what do you think is the best variety for local gardens here?
Well, Al Wilson, now departed, told me that Jet Star was the best variety for New England. I'm a big fan of heirlooms. I find them, although not beautiful, the most delicious tastes. There are many. I mean, everybody has their favorite, but those are two I usually have in the garden.
Do you plant both cherries and regular tomatoes?
I gave up on cherries because one plant could supply the whole world, I think. And it's hard. We're often on Saturday mornings, we have so much to pick for the food pantry, and the cherry tomatoes are quite tedious to pick. And so this year I didn't put in any cherries. I don't have any.
Okay.
I know they taste good, but they're also readily available.
That they are. Okay, Ming Sai would like to know why tomato plants leaves curl up suddenly.
Curl up suddenly.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yes, I'm afraid that's a question I cannot answer. I do not.
That'd be maybe lack of water.
There could be aphids. If you looked under the curled leaf, if there's some dark bugs, it could be aphids.
And
they can be hosed off, or leave lamb's quarter in your garden until the ladybugs come. Lamb's quarters will draw the aphids and they'll stay off your vegetables. I have right now is a real good example. I have several lamb's quarters in my garden that are all black at the top, and the leaves have all black, but none of my vegetables do. And then once the ladybugs come, they're going to eat the aphids, and you can take the lamb's quarter out.
Tell me where people are going to ask, where do you get a lamb's quarter?
Oh, it comes all by itself. It's a weed.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, I don't have a picture of it.
Okay, they can look it up on Google. So look it up on Google, and so plant that for the aphids. And to get off aphids, it's warm water and soap usually, right?
Or just hose them off.
Just hose them off. Okay. Okay, my list of questions goes on to cucumbers. So how about the best variety for local gardens?
I say market more for traditional, and then I'm doing some of the little ones. Unfortunately, little.
Like Persian?
Yes, the Persian ones. And I know little is in the name, but I don't have, I can look it up. But anyway, I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue. So.
Okay, yeah, those are really good.
They are, and they're prolific.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, you get so many, yeah.
Okay. Do you run them on the ground or on the trellis?
I do both. I usually plant them near my fence, and I put a link so that they can go up. So I have some on the fence and some on the ground.
Okay. And what about, somebody just talked to me about, she was fighting off the cucumber beetle on the cucumber virus. What do you do, or have you had it?
I'm pretty lucky with things. I haven't had the cucumber beetle for many years. And the health, not having bugs has a lot to do with your soil. The better your soil is, the less bugs you have, the stronger your plants. So to get them off. So
we've talked about soil a lot. Do you get your soil tested?
I do. I didn't test this year, but I did last year. And I actually, if anything, have too much good things in my garden.
Yeah,
I have way over optimum on all categories. So you can overfeed your things. So this year I've cut back a little bit. And I'm also learning to do no-till and putting in ground covers so that you don't have to mulch so much and
Right.
leave the green manures in the ground.
I just found, matter of fact, my radishes did not come this year. And I thought, what was going wrong? And I went and looked it up. I have too much nitrogen. And
Too much, yeah.
too much, and that's not good for radishes. So that just does them in. The weather wasn't very good for them either. We kept going back and forth. But some of these crops can be difficult. Are you growing new crops for the food pantry this year? You mentioned.
I put in both turnips. Well, I haven't put the parsnips in yet. I'll do that for fall, but we grew turnips for the first time. In the spring, we've already harvested them and brought the greens to the food pantry. And I'll put a fall crop in now, probably in the next 3 weeks. That'll be ripe in the fall. I didn't get much bulb this spring. I don't know whether that was the weather, but the greens are also edible for turnips, so we did send them.
I wonder about parsnips. How do they grow? How long do they take? I would think parsnips would
A
take
while, but you can leave them in the ground all winter. They grow like carrots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they can be really sweet if they've been out there for a while, I think. Do you grow Brussels sprouts?
No, I don't grow any Brussels sprouts. So.
How about cabbage? That cabbage is something that creates.
Yes, I love cabbage. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, we grow. I have a spring crop in. It always struggles, but a few plants make it. And I have probably 6 broccoli plants that got tiny little heads right now, and 2 Savoy cabbage and 2 cauliflowers are all that are left of the ones I put in. They struggled this year with both dryness and the cold. They like the cold, but they had to get started. So,
Yeah. It was a tough spring for the vegetables.
right.
Do you get worms on the cabbage and the broccoli?
Not since I learned last year about putting in hyssop, anise hyssop.
Yeah.
I put the anise hyssop plant in my cabbage patch last year, and really, I hardly saw a worm. So I've done it again this year. But I do use dipel, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, or sometimes called BT, and I just powder it on the heads. It's completely harmless to people, and you can use it right up to harvest, and that'll keep them down too. So I just sprinkle it on the head, that's all.
Oh, sprinkle on the head. Okay. Yeah, we didn't talk about fertilizer much earlier. How do you do it? Is it you buy compost from?
I buy a truckload of, or I have bought a truckload of compost from Great Brook Farm in Carlisle for 40 years. This was my 40th delivery this year.
Wow.
So, and my soil has, I'd say I could probably dig down 18 or 20 inches before I hit any problem. It's very, I never have any puddles after rain. It's very absorbent. I have added a peat moss pretty regularly, and sometimes green sand. I don't know if people know what that is. It's like a bentonite for the soil, but it's a natural ingredient, and it's very good to help that be fluffier, I guess is the way to say it, and to keep the moisture longer. That would be a way to put it.
You just sprinkle it on?
Well, I usually mix it when we're putting the compost out. I'll also mix some green sand with it.
Seems to me for those of us with clay-like soil, that would be
a
really
good
helpful.
additive, right? But
Yeah.
peat moss is still probably your best.
Yeah. Okay. Good point there, though. How about zucchini and summer squash? Do you have problems with the borer?
Well, I used to. Again, I brought this book with me today because I own it now. Carrots Love Tomatoes. It's about companion planting, and it is awesome. Its author is Louise Riot. She's from Oklahoma, but it's a classic and it's been around for a long time. Anyway, she puts radishes in the hills where she grows her summer squash. I did it last year for the first time. 3 or 4 seeds in this round circle. So I usually have 3 plants in that circle. And I just put about 4 radishes, and you let them just grow to seed. And I harvested, I would say, a month longer, and I only had 1 worm in the hills last year.
Fascinating.
There's another thing you can do is cover the crop when they first emerge, cover them until they get too big for the cover. And that keeps the fly that lays that worm away from the stem and so you don't get it also. So I did both things this year. I covered them, and I also put the radishes in.
Well, maybe Mina and Matt can put that book on the library's agenda if they don't have it already.
We can send it out in the recap.
Okay, good. That'd be a good idea.
And I can put it in the chat right now. Can you just repeat what it was again?
It's called Carrots Love Tomatoes.
Oh yeah, I know we have that one actually.
Okay. So everybody will go request it. And a curbside pickup in 2 weeks, you're not gonna have enough books. Well, that's good. Okay. So you mentioned you're not using as much mulch. Do you mulch? I mean,
well, I mulch my paths with wet newspaper and salt marsh hay. But I usually have put that around broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and my tomatoes. But it's hard to deal with afterwards. You've got to take it away. It's not good in the compost bin because it takes a long time to break down and so forth. So that's why I'm trying these green manures this year. So I just planted the first one yesterday. It's peas, field peas, and oats. And I've planted that. We've just put that all around our tomato plants, and hopefully it'll grow. It'll be green. It's a green manure. Once we pull our plants, I'll just leave it all winter, and it should be dead in the spring and ready to plow under.
Oh, interesting. Now, so you have a plow or a rototill? How are you doing that?
Well, I'm trying not to till. You shouldn't have to after the winter. They'll be dead. You'll just fork it over. It should be.
So you're just gonna fork it over like I do with my small garden. You have a much bigger garden. Okay.
Well, I do have a rototiller, and I haven't done it before, so it may be too hard to turn over. It's an experiment this year.
Well, it's a good experiment. I mean, we're all trying to do things that, work better. And the wet newspaper is a good way of keeping the weeds out. And
that works well. Wet newspaper and salt marsh hay. But it's expensive to do that. That's the other reason why the other things, the other things, the green manures should keep you from having to use so much compost. They'll be composting themselves.
So you just go to a store and ask for green manure, and they come up with
No, you've got to order. There's sweet white clover, buckwheat, and the other oats and field peas and winter rye. Those are all the four that most people use.
Okay.
You'll probably have to get them from a seed company. I don't. Wilson's might have winter rye. I don't know about the field peas and things like that.
Because I don't think I've ever seen that. It's something I've heard about people doing that over the winter to make it healthier. It's good. How about, this is the sad subject, given how the days are beautiful, but my garden is drying up. What about watering? How do you handle that?
I am not a heavy waterer. I think plants really only need water at the beginning when they're small. It's been proven, actually. And then you just need, I maybe water them 40 minutes once or twice a week would be the most I ever water. But once a plant is established, it doesn't need much water. Then that encourages the roots to go deeper, which is good for the plant. But you also have to have soil that's soft enough for the roots to go deep. So
that's right. 40 minutes twice a week. And now you're using a sprinkler or individual watering, like with a wand or a bucket?
Well, like for instance, yesterday I just transplanted bok choy seedlings. So I gave them a hand water. I watered everything last night. Yeah. And then today I'll have to see, those seedlings may need some hand watering until they're really established, which is a few days usually.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting that you're growing bok choy. Is that because of the food pantry and our clientele there?
That's right. There's several things we grow for them, several kinds of bok choy. And I harvest some of my weeds, which I have a lot of purslane, and I ask every week, are we bringing too much purslane? She said there's none left. So that's, I do make a salad out of it myself. It's something you can cook or eat raw. It's, again, I should have brought a picture of purslane. but at any rate, it can be eaten in a salad with like tomatoes and mint, things like that. It makes a nice salad.
Wilson's has it sometimes. I've
Oh,
seen
they
it.
do? Okay, yeah. All right, good.
Um,
Well, I
and-
have a lot. If anybody wants to, I have a lot right now.
Well, then they should come visit you in those visiting hours. You could give us the favor. So you've added those. Were there things that you stopped planting because
Kale. We stopped planting kale because that's the only thing the food pantry has asked me not to bring anymore.
I kind of agree with them. I don't like kale very much either.
So, and I don't eat it, so I stopped planting that. And you asked about Brussels sprouts, but my husband doesn't like it, so I just have never planted them. Anyway, so we stick with cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower.
Oh dear. That's good to hear. Annette Dupont, I'm going to ask you to clarify your question. You said not sure who for them refers to. I'm not sure where
For them means the
food pantry?
people who are the recipients of the Interfaith Garden produce.
Yes. Okay. And I know I really have enjoyed when I was allowed to work over there. I'm considered too old now to work out there at the moment, given the situation. But I really enjoyed being there and watching all the fresh vegetable coming in and packing it up. It was so lovely. And they often allowed me to taste the herbs and sort of say, this is what this is. This is what that is. But not everybody knows it.
We send a lot of herbs to the food pantry. It's part of our
And you send flowers too, as I remember.
Yes, and my zinnia, I should have my first zinnia tomorrow, I hope.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's just like that man said, you need the flowers. What did he say? Go on raising flowers and they'll give you a certain sanity.
That's right.
And it's certainly lovely to look at the colors. People are constantly asking me about how many hours of sun. How many hours of sun would you say for a vegetable garden?
Well, the most books tell you that you need at least 6. And I would say more is better. The more open the space, the better. The better the growing is. And we have a relatively short season here, considering our weather. So I think the more sun, the better.
In the hot summer, do you try to grow lettuce under the shade or something?
No, I'm just harvesting my last lettuce this week, probably. And then I don't. And you've got other things. You've got peas and green beans and things like that. So then I'll start again in August growing lettuce. But I don't try to grow it from now until August. I just don't plant any.
I've never been very successful with that fall lettuce crop.
Oh, no, I do. Yeah.
I have a hard time getting that one. It just doesn't seem, it seems to be a little awkward. Okay. Mulch and watering. Oh, I asked all my list of questions. Okay. Nobody asked anything about the Victory Gardens in the past. And I would suggest if anybody really wanted to know more about a Victory Garden that you do go visit Carla's garden, because it's not Carla's garden, but it's on her land, on the Interfaith Garden, and now this year's Victory Garden. The Lexington Remembers World War II has been working to celebrate World War II this year, and this is one thing that people can go to and visit with your mask on. And it's quite lovely just to see the garden and walk through it. The days, again, that it's open are Tuesday, 4:30 to 6 p.m., and Saturdays, 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. Would they get to see the picking? Is it going to the food pantry then?
Yes, well, Saturday morning, we're starting at 8 now because the food pantry distribution system has changed a bit. So they would probably see some, but not always.
Not always. I remember sometimes you see the cart coming down Hancock Street and across, and it's always lovely to see it. I take pictures there. And then it's open July 4th and Labor Day, which is a very lovely, to see a great big garden like this is really neat. You can't get down into Wilson's garden at the moment. So here's something your kids begin to appreciate. And as gardening has become so popular with the pandemic, I really recommend it. I see one more QA. What kind of barrier do you suggest for backyard gardens?
You mean for fence against animals?
I would assume that's what you're talking about.
Okay. I have a 1-inch black vinyl covered chicken wire fence that's buried 6 inches in the ground around the garden. And and it's up at least 4 feet high. So since we've had that fence, the rabbits have not come in unless there's a hole in the fence. So that's been successful. I do net our blueberries for birds, and that has also worked well. We just put that up, but I have to do it after the flowers are visited by the bees, so the timing is correct. I have not been able to keep chipmunks out. And this year everybody has many chipmunks, so that's been a problem. And I think you'd have to electrify it. I don't know how you'd keep chipmunks out. It's pretty hard, I had just a hanging basket on the fence of strawberries, about ready to pick them, and the chipmunk ate every single one of them. So gone.
I think what bothers me most about the chipmunks is they'll take a bite out of one tomato, then a bite out of another tomato, and a bite out of another, and throw them all on the ground.
From someone in the garden once said to me, a garden is 1/3 for the weather, 1/3 for the animals, and 1/3 for you.
Oh my, it must have been hard to be one of the people who have settled on New England. And to continue on the barrier for backyard gardens, I have a backyard garden, and it's very similar to what Carla said. My garden is raised. The fence goes underneath into the ground to keep the animals out. And it stands about, if you go back to that earlier, it was one of the first films we did. Stands about 20 inches over. So we've kept out the rabbits and the woodchucks and the skunks and the squirrels. We have not kept out the chipmunks. So that's a thing. Now, Fan also wants to know, how do you stop bunnies from getting to the veggies? Well, the fence does it.
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty hard. I mean, all the things you buy, Scram and the other things, if it rains, you have to put it back on again. Some of those things are quite expensive, so they're not as good as a physical barrier. Yeah.
Yep. Bunnies are tough. You're gonna have to learn how to, in the old days, cats would get them, but now we don't let our cats out. So now they're really around. And we have a question here on, do you grow corn? Any tips? I don't grow corn.
Okay, I have grown corn in the past. Now I find it does two things. You can buy it in season and it's delicious. It takes a lot out of your ground and it takes a lot of space. But there are some tips. The old people put a fish head under every ear of corn plant that was, and that means some fish fertilizer is good for corn. You can also put beans to wrap around it, and you can put a drop of mineral oil at the top of each ear as it forms, and that will keep those, there's a worm that gets in that top, top of the ear. And I understand that a drop of mineral oil will keep those worms away. So those are things I know about growing it from. It's hard, but you'd have to electrify the fence to keep the raccoons out.
Yes. Yeah, and the raccoons certainly do like that corn. And they are raccoons around here in Lexington. That is for sure. And groundhogs, which can really do a number on your garden. I remember being very shocked of having moved up from New York City. And here I was on Hancock Street, and we had a groundhog in our garden. And my neighbor came over and decided, and she was a saintly older lady. She said, I've decided how we're going to get rid of the groundhog. There's 7 holes, and each of you are going to stand with a hose at one of the holes. And then she pointed to my husband, and Tom, you're big, and you were going to stand there with an axe. And he said, no, Jean, I'm not standing with an axe. My wife is not standing there with a hose. So the next I knew, she got a gun. And she shot the groundhog. This was way back in the late 70s. She shot the groundhog, but then her daughter told me that she saltpetered them and they ate them. And I was like, oh, my neighbors right here in Lexington, Massachusetts ate a groundhog. And I said, what did it taste like? And she said, it was awful, really awful.
I've never known anybody to eat a groundhog.
I've heard about it down south, but not up here. I was like, ooh. Amazing. So I don't see that we have any more questions. If anybody has less, I've answered all three there.
There's actually a couple, I think, in the chat, Ashley.
Oh, the chat. Let me check the chat. Okay. Oh, here's one. Have you ever grown potatoes in a potato box?
I have not. I grow potatoes every year, but I have not ever grown them in a box. But I mean, it's pretty easy to grow potatoes. They're happy anywhere. They don't need much food. They don't need much of anything. They'll just grow. In fact, they come up. If you didn't harvest them all, they're all over where you left them last year. I usually have the kids who come harvest potatoes because it's so much fun, but we don't always get them all. And then in the spring, I have all these potato plants coming up in places where the harvest was last year.
Oh, can you still eat the potatoes?
Yes. Yeah. Oh no. You can.
Ah, well, interesting. What do chipmunks usually eat in the way of veggies? Tomatoes. I know they eat veggies.
Tomatoes and strawberries. I see them in my garden, but I can't tell where they've been chewing. So I don't know how much other stuff they eat. I think they'll eat a little bit of everything. But
yeah.
Those are the two things that they've mostly been on.
Oh, the same lady, this is a reference to the potato box. She thought it might help with keeping up with the mounding of the potatoes.
You mean the box? She's talking about being in a like a wood frame box or on the ground or up above.
Yes, it's a wood frame box.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it might help with that, or just you can put mulch on it too. You know, you could put some newspaper and hay. I just build up the hills. But yesterday we were working on the potatoes, and Larry Marin, who was working, said his son he maintains the vegetable garden at their house, and his son is a good gardener, has been gardening for years, and said he never hills his potatoes. So.
Oh, she says thank you.
It's necessary.
One of the things we've noticed with all the gardening thing, gardeners all have their own ways of doing things, and you got to kind of pick and choose which way you want. Yeah. And you know, some will do the hills, some won't do the hills. Some will tolerate the bunnies, others won't tolerate the bunnies. It's kind of
some pick off the suckers, some don't pick off the suckers.
Yeah, you can debate forever which way. You do. Oh, one thing I should have asked you: do you liquid fertilizer at all?
I do use the fish emulsion, and I used to use Miracle Grow, but I'm trying to get away from that because those are things that are readily available, and if your soil is rich enough, you don't really need them. But it does work, you know, especially for lettuces.
Oh, and we have a new question. We are thinking of growing a fruit tree back of our house. Can you suggest what kind of tree to grow if you have the experience?
Well, in this area, I would not put an apple in because they require too much spraying, okay? And I would suggest a Reliant, that's the name of it, peach. You don't need two, they're reliable, they have good harvests, and they're very good for the backyard garden. So that would be the one I would suggest. I haven't had much luck with pears. What?
You don't have to spray it much.
I don't spray mine at all. I don't spray them at all. I put little, you know, those little whirly fans that you get at fairs, you know, that kids blow. I put those in the branches to keep the birds off. But I don't, but I don't spray. I try not to spray anything. And I've had pretty good luck. So the bird, you know, squirrels will get them. I can't keep the squirrels out without netting them, and it's hard to net a tree. But that would be my suggestion. Man across the street has a tree he put right in the front yard that is always covered with oranges, and he doesn't do anything to them either. So, except take care of the tree, you know, prune it and so forth.
Huh, interesting. Somebody just lent me, or I'm going to babysit for the summer, a kumquat plant, which she says has constant kumquats.
Oh,
And I discovered, oh, no, we haven't figured out what to do with the kumquat, which makes a nice salad dressing, matter of fact. And so, and it's non-fattening. I love, this is great. But there are lots of ways to have fruit in your house and so forth. And blueberries, Carla mentioned them. I've had a blueberry bush for years. They really grow here.
they do. They're happy here. They love acid soil, which most of our soil is acid. That's
And they're very pretty in the fall. They're beautiful to look at in the fall. And they have a lovely coloring and so forth. So we really recommend it. So you guys have been great. Matt, the library will have this on the files that your friends can look up again. Carla was full of wonderful tips. And we have, instead of me saying anything meaningful, we have a small little video from one of her volunteers.
1 second, sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
Hopefully this one works a little bit better. I don't know.
Especially now, I mean, I'm not a big gardener. I never have been, but I always wanted to be a gardener. And during the pandemic, I'm finding it very helpful on a spiritual, emotional level to get my hands in the dirt and at the same time do something that's for other people. And it feels elemental and it comforts me.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.